And welcome back to Grow Big Red. I'm John Fesh with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. This is my colleague.
Jonathan Larson. I'm an entomologist with the university.
And I'm a horticulturist. And we work together a lot. And today for the program, we first started talking about what bugs do in the wintertime. And now we're going to talk about what humans do in the wintertime. And hopefully that's not slip on the ice. And that can be a problem from a human standpoint. It can also be a problem when it comes to protecting our plants. And when we try to prevent ourselves from slipping and falling on the ice, sometimes we can be a little overdone and we can be a little aggressive with the products we use. And sometimes that can have a damaging effect on the plants nearby because they can damage them. A lot of them are salt-based, and that just seems to suck the water right out of the plant material, out of turf, out of ground covers, out of trees and shrubs, anything kind of low to the ground, but even big trees too. For the most part, we really focus on the ground covers, the lawns, and the smaller trees and shrubs as far as what can be susceptible to damage. So again, the first thing is we want to be safe ourselves, and that's probably more important than any plant we might want to grow. And so we think about what could we put on. The first thing you think about is grabbing a bag of ice melt. We have a couple examples right here. A lot of times now these days you got two choices. You've got the immediately aggressive products, and then you've also got earth-friendly products, which is nice to have that. But really the proof or the details, the devil is in the details, so to speak. And regardless of how pretty or whatever is on the bag, you always want to turn it over and see what's in the bag. And I'll just direct your attention right here, and you have to remember a little bit of chemistry when you go to figure this out. So this product is a mixture of KCl. Do you remember what that is? Potassium chloride, very good. And NaCl, sodium chloride. So potassium and sodium chloride. What we don't know is how much or the percentage of each in a bag. Just by the name earth-friendly, I would sort of think it's along the lines of at least being half and half. But what we know about potassium chloride is that it's a little bit caustic, and sodium chloride is even more caustic. So we just want to make sure that we're not using too much of it. And the same is true with this other product. And we look again for the back of the bag. And we've got, this one's a little bit different product. This one is, again, sodium chloride. But also, this one, there are products called magnesium acetate. This one is magnesium chloride hexaacetate. So these are just different products that can be used. So there are various products that can be used for that purpose of melting the ice. Pretty much for the most part, the claims that they talk about are melting ice to a certain degree or a certain temperature, 0, 5 below, 10 below, something along those lines. And for the most part, that works out pretty well. The thing is, it's a matter of density and how much you want to use. A lot of that has to do with the site. If you're on a little bit of a hillside, here we are in River City, and most people have kind of a slopey part of their landscape that they want to take care of.
That would be the bad one to fall down.
That would be the bad one to fall down. It'd be like a skating rink almost. So and those are where you tend to have a lot of ice melt put down. Also the usage. I was recently at a orthopedic rehabilitation center, and this is where a lot of people are walking around very gingerly because they had some knee surgery or something like that. And oh my gosh, it looked like they had spread mulch with all this stuff. You're crunching as you walk along because they just cannot take the risk of anyone falling while they're on that facility. All of that to say that that's going to be corrosive to that concrete, especially if it's new concrete, as well as damaging to the plant material nearby. Again, the turf, the landscape plants, the ground covers, anything that's in that smaller area is going to be possibly damaged. All right, and when you're using these products, I always recommend something like this, a little bit of protection for your hands. If you've ever used it without that, you'll notice your hands feel a little bit
They get crusty after.
Crusty, and sometimes just melt because there can be kind of just a slimy substance all over your hands. And while that's not particularly damaging, it's just you never want to take the risk. So I always put on some gloves, preferably ones without holes in them like these do. But it's nice to have some nice rubber gloves that do a good job of that. We see that all the time with pesticides too.
Absolutely.
And butyl rubber gloves work well for that. Nitrile gloves work well for that.
And it warns you on the back to do this as well.
Okay. right here, read the big red
That's right.
warning, or in this case, the big yellow warning. It always is a good idea.
So what happens to your concrete if you use this on there? You mentioned some causticity. What would be the problem there?
Most likely what's going to happen if you use too much of this is it's going to start crumbling, or it's going to start flaking. It kind of depends on how the concrete was poured. I just had some concrete poured recently, and the concrete person put some fibers in it, and it said it would help it stick together a little bit and make it a little bit more resistant to damage from salt and ice melt products. But either way, it can still happen just because it's corrosive, and it'll tend to break it apart. If nothing else, it'll generally shorten the life of the concrete. But when it comes to the plant material, what it does is, in addition to the melting of what's ever on the top of the turf grass or the ground cover, it will actually dehydrate. It'll pull water out in order to melt that area and turn it back into a liquid. And then, of course, it might freeze again at night. One thing I want to bring up as an alternative would be the use of sand in addition to the ice melt. There's really no way to sort of replace this completely or to completely do away with the ice melt product. It is to simply dilute it, if you will. And sand really helps a lot with that. For the most part, sand, if you have some leftover playground sand or I found it helpful to have a handy bucket next to the ice melt.
It's hard to have a handful of sand.
Yeah, it kind of runs away with you. See, it just kind of runs away. But if you use it about 50-50, we found that over the years that this works really well. And that way you're only using half as much material in the landscape itself. So mixing it will still give you that traction or the gription. I've heard pro athletes use that term, gription. Coach, I couldn't get any gription. You know, it's like they don't care. They want you to perform. But anyway, but we as humans want gription or traction on concrete, and the sand helps us get there, especially if it's brand new concrete. Again, the concrete person who installed it in my driveway told me, hey, don't use any ice melt at all, just use sand. Now, and other people sometimes will suggest using kitty litter or calcined clay-like material. That can get kind of messy, and then you track it all into the house. You can track the sand in the house too, but it's much easier to vacuum up the sand than it is the kitty litter. But again, the product choice is yours. It's lesser amounts of the particular debris and melting from the ice melt products themselves.
Plus, if it's sand, you can pretend you just got back from the beach.
Oh, you have an imagination, don't you? A couple other things here we want to talk about. And this is really from the standpoint of avoidance of damage. You probably have noticed what we have in front of us here. And these are strap-on devices for your shoes. You can buy these on the internet or in some local hardware stores. And these are just products that you can actually put on. And these actually are my size. They fit on me. Yours would probably be a little bit larger.
A little bit more Sasquatch size.
A little bit larger. But they actually work pretty well. And it's not like you can go running in these shoes. You just have to kind of gingerly walk around. But again, if you have a slope in an area, you really want some traction. And in addition to the sand, this is one way to help you get that. And so these are worth it. I think these cost like $15, $20. And they look a little funny. But boy, when you're starting to slide down the hill, this is when you wish you had something like that.
That's
so
pretty
just
cool.
Another little hint that you might want to think about. Another thing is really more the technique, and that's why we have the shovel. Jonathan, you're going to demonstrate to us.
Oh, cool.
I should have probably started with this, but the first thing you want to think about, actually it makes sense either before or after. The other thing you want to think about is when you're clearing off all the ice and snow after a snowfall event, it's wise not to put the snow in the same area all the time. So in the studio here, this is a studio like you might expect in most television studios. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras, and some places you might have one over here. So think of the camera as a place where you would deposit snow and ice. You would not always want to put the snow and ice from the whole driveway right here, okay? You would want to spread it out here, over by that camera, over by that camera, over by that camera, and try to be diffuse in your snow deposition process. So as you go about scooping and slushing, okay, we're going to have a little demonstration here now. Okay, over here, over there,
over that way,
over that way, that way.
So I got to walk around though, right?
Well,
I can't be lazy and do this.
That's right. So you have to move it around. The point is, the more you put it in one particular location, the more concentrated it's going to be. And if it was just ice and snow, that would be a problem in itself. But if you also add the ice melt to it, that exacerbates the problem. Putting just the snow and ice in one particular area can be a problem because, again, it gets really tall. What happens over a period of time is that excludes oxygen from the soil. And our landscape plants do have oxygen, or do need oxygen over the wintertime, just like we do as humans. And so if you continually pile that up during our typical winter, we have freezing and thawing and very cold weather. That'll form as an ice layer and then just it'd be like ice on a lake. There's no way to get water, to get oxygen down to the plant below it. And what'll happen is that once that breaks apart in the spring, there'll be big dead spots. Like this area here will be entirely dead because you've piled snow upon itself. And then more ice and snow and more ice and snow. And that will cause problems. Then if you add to it the deposition of not just the ice and snow, but also the salty slush from the ice melt products, that even makes it worse. So that's certainly something to avoid as well. Avoiding the deposition of the ice and snow, and then also the salt and slush itself. So using all these things together makes sense. And what we can do is help ourselves as humans, and then help our plants in the landscape avoid damage through the winter, and then you can have a good, healthy landscape in the spring. All right. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up here for the two things. We talked about taking care of insects and just knowing what they do in the winter and how they go through the average winter and how they avoid damage to themselves, and then also how we can avoid damage to ourselves and also damage to the plants and turf and lawn in the landscape. You just have to use a little bit of common sense and try to get a little bit of more information. If you do want more information, we can always help you out with that, or you could just contact Grow Big Red at growbigred.unl.edu.
That's us.
We have information on our blog website, and we also have videos and a lot of other helpful information. We have a podcast.
You even have an audio podcast.
Audio podcast you could listen to.
That kind of entertainment.
So lots of good information for you available from the University of Nebraska Extension. I'm John Fesh, and this is Jonathan Larson, and we're available to help you whenever you need trouble. Our phone number is 402-444-7804. Have a good week.